Alright everyone, so now we're going to make the knight change costume as he gets damaged. So we're going to go to damage knight. If hits are greater than level, so the higher the level, the harder this is to satisfy, then he's going to take some damage. And taking some damage means he's going to advance to the next costume where it looks like some of his armor's missing. So switch costume to... Well, remember they come in groups of 16, and we want to move to the next chunk, next 16 length chunk. So whatever costume you're in, just move it up 16. So grab a plus and drop it in there, and then grab the costume number, put that in there, and then put this in there. Okay, so I also need to reset the hits. So the idea here is you keep changing the hits by 1, but as soon as it goes above this threshold, as soon as it goes above level, then that means some damage is done. So you switch the costume to the next thing, and then you reset the hits. Because you've recorded the amount of damage now in the costume change, so you don't need to keep track of the old damage. And you kind of reset it, and when it goes past level again, then you change the costume number again. So this is kind of a little clock that gets reset. Every time you smash away a piece of the knight's armor, the hits get reset, and then you have to do it all over again to smash the next piece of the knight's armor. Now, on its own, this isn't going to work right. It's going to produce all kinds of weird dances and changes in the sprite, because what we've got to do is we've got to change all these other switch costumes so that they work as well. So let's do this systematically. So the first thing I want to do is I want to look at this one. So at the end of the attack, sprite tells the knight to switch the costume back to the very first costume that it has. Now you can see now that this isn't always going to work. So if you suppose that, you've been smashing the knight, and now he's down to this, he's lost his helmet, he's lost his shield, he's lost his boots, and then he attacks, and then the code here says, okay, now go back to your very first costume. Oh, well, if that happens, then he's going to go all the way back to here, and he's going to have all of his armor back, just because he attacked. So that's not right. What we want is, after he's done an attack, so after he's there, he's done his attack, he's jabbed his spear, and then he withdraws the spear, withdraws the spear, withdraws the spear, and then we want him to go back not to the beginning of all the costumes, but just to the beginning of this set of costumes. So that would be here. So how do we find this? How do we find the costume that's in the beginning of his set of 16? So the trick is to use the mod operator. Always useful. So the mod operator, remember, returns the remainder. And we know that all the costumes come in blocks of 16. So what we have to do is we have to divide the current costume that he's in by 16 and take the mod, the remainder, and then that will tell you where he is in the block. So, for example, in this costume here, costume 114, well, where is that in its block of 16? Well, 114 divided by 16 is 7, so 112. So this would be 0, and then this would be number 2. So it's second in its block. So this is what this code is doing. It's dividing it by 16, taking the remainder, and that tells you where it is in the block. So if we want to switch it to the first one in the block, what we want to do is we want to take the current costume number minus the position of that costume number in the block, and that'll take it back down to 0. So if it's third in the block and you subtract 3, it'll take it to 0. If it's 10th in the block and you subtract 10, you subtract its position in the block, then that'll take it back down to 0 in the block. And then to find the first one in the block, you've got to add 1, because this takes you to 0 in the block. So to get the first one in the block, you've got to add 1. So plus 1. And so this will take you to the first costume in the block, which is what we want you to go to after an attack. Now, we're going to use this again, because it's a very useful little formula. And whatever number we put in here is going to be the relevant number in the block. So if you put in a 5 here, it's going to take you to the 5th number in the block, and so on. Be careful to grab the right part when you're trying to copy this or duplicate it. The right part is just where the plus is. If you grab the minus, you're going to get something else, and then when you copy this, or if you try to duplicate this, you'll get less than what you wanted. So you're going to get crazy effects if you do that. So what you need to do is you need to make sure you always grab a block by the main operator, which in this case is the plus. So now let's go through. This is the setup. So it's okay that this takes him right to the first costume because he starts off like that. But here, during the attack direction, this says switch costume to the 13th costume. Well, what we really mean is the 13th in the block. So we need to take this down here and change that to 13. And then we're going to do it again. Here it says switch costume to the 5th one. Well, originally we were just dealing with the first block, so it was okay just to have the 5th one. But what we really mean is 5th in the block, whatever block he's up to given the damage that he's taken. So we're going to change that to the 5th in the block. And then the same thing here. This is the 9th one. So we're going to put a 9 in here, and that'll change us to the 9th one in the block. Now here, when it takes a step, it goes to next costume, next costume, next costume. But when it gets to the 4th one, it goes back to the 1st one. Now, when we were just dealing with a full suit of armor, it was okay just to have number 1. But what we really mean is we want the first one in the block. So we're going to bring this down here, and we're going to put a 1 in there. And then one other thing to check for here is this. It says if costume number equals 4. Well, we don't want that anymore. What we mean is the 4th one in the block. So if costume number equals number 4 in the block, then it's time to switch the costume back to the first one in the block. Okay, let's give that a try. Oops, he vanished. And I need to get rid of that. I think the problem is this. You got the damage knight, but then it does the spawn knight, and the spawn has some hide commands inside it. So we'll just throw that away for now. Okay, that's great. If you ignore the strange thing with the suit of armor at the end, which is going to require some separate code, we were knocking off the bits of armor as we went. It was only taking 1 shot to knock off a piece of armor because I've set him up to appear on the first level, and so on the first level he only takes 1 hit. But we can playtest this by setting him up to go in a higher level, and then seeing if he takes 3 hits on level 3 before he loses a bit of armor, and so on. So playtest that, and I will see you in the next video. Thank you for listening, and if you find this video useful, please hit like and subscribe.